Points with Dan Proft going one-on-one with Donna Brazil Thursday, March 22nd. Get your tickets at 560theanswer.com/beyond.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and we've spoken with her before. Cultural critic Suzanne Venker. Interesting piece for Fox News recently. Why she's happy Trump's not a feminist. Let's break up our Nunez memo talk here. We're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Suzanne Venker, the author of the book, The Alpha Female's Guide to Men and Marriage, How Love Works. Suzanne, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So you celebrated President Trump telling Piers Morgan that he's not a feminist. Why?
Right. Well, that wasn't my title exactly because I knew he was. I mean, I knew he was.
Well, right.
It's like that was not news.
Yeah.
They changed my title. But anyway, what I wrote about in that article was how refreshing it is to have somebody point out very matter-of-factly that feminism is not for everybody, because that was the quote, of course, that got pulled from his interview, is that he said, I wouldn't go that far. He said, because I'm for everybody. I'm for women. I'm for men. So that alone is significant to have a president who kind of, which is typical because he's not politically correct, right? Just lays on the table what people know, but you rarely hear in the media.
Well, former President Barack Obama, I mean, he proudly declared himself a feminist. What did George W. Bush say when asked that question?
So, to the best of my knowledge, he wasn't asked that question directly. So I don't know I've never heard anything about him specifically on that subject. But his daughter did come out. One of the two daughters did come out and write something that she believes he's a feminist based on the way he raised her. But as far as anything directly out of his mouth, I don't know of anything he said. But one of the things that I point out, though, is that all presidents, whether Republican or Democrat, still have to appease the feminist base. And that was really the point of that article and why it's so different with Trump in office, because, of course, Trump can't be told what to do, and he doesn't really he's not going to be kowtowed into a special interest group if he doesn't, personally agree with it. Whereas that's very different in and of itself, because the feminist elite are extremely powerful, and the pressure that they put on folks in the White House, whether they're on the left or the right, is so great that most presidents cave. And so that was the point of the article.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And so we had an interesting and sort of rare contrast side by side a couple of weekends ago with the March for Life on the one hand and the anniversary of all the Resistance PHAT marchers on the other hand, the first year anniversary. So you had these rallies around the country as well. What is that? What is kind of side by side? Tell us how you interpret that in terms of where the feminist movement is in 2018.
Right. So that's also a great example of, why it wasn't surprising that he said he's not, because, of course, he spoke at the pro-life march. So that alone divides you, unfortunately, because abortion is the litmus test as to whether or not you're really, truly a quote-unquote, feminist. But so the reality is that whatever we call feminism today, whatever we look at it and see, it bears no resemblance to what it was in the past. That's just obvious to anyone who's, awake and paying attention. If you just even juxtapose the marches with, back 100 years ago when women were marching for the right to vote, there's no similarity. I mean, it's just as striking. Somebody put together a video putting those two right next to each other, and it was really almost comical because, of course, the Women's March has no specific goal. It's just ranting and raving about mainly Trump, of course, but what they believe America is, which is this terribly oppressive patriarchal society where women have no rights or women don't have enough rights or whatever the case may be. But there's no specific thing binding them together. So if you ask them, why are you marching? You're never going to get the same answer because they really don't know why they're marching.
And I had friends that marched several times, and I just went, well, what are you marching for? Well, the Me Too movement. And then another person said to get Trump out of office, and another friend said to get Republicans out of office. And I said, oh, okay, but so when I was growing up, my grandma was a feminist, one of them, and I think if she saw what was going on today with the feminist movement, she might think that they need, to tone it down a little bit because they're all so angry. Do you notice that?
They're
too?
also
Obviously,
angry. And
what are they angry? They're victims.
Unfortunately, Yes, and those are the two biggest things. People don't respond well to that. They don't like just anger for anger's sake. I mean, feminists love it because they talk about female rage and how important that is to get out. But that's not the right avenue because people will turn off to that. And plus, people know that we don't live in an oppressive society for women. So basically, the argument falls flat anyway. You're not going to get people on board for something that they know for a fact is just not true.
The left seems to be cannibalizing itself in some respects on a number of fronts. One of them is this. Interesting. Last week, Rose McGowan, the actress, one of the Harvey Weinstein, one of the first Harvey Weinstein accusers, she's doing a book signing in New York, and she gets shouted down, heckled by a trans person because of the comments that Rose McGowan had previously made about female trans people, saying they assume because they felt like women on the inside, that's not developing as a woman, that's not growing as a woman, that's not living in the world as a woman. And that kind of, perhaps one would argue, common sense, obvious statement, that is verboten with respect to leftist orthodoxy.
Right. And so that, again, just shines the light on really, I just don't feel there's any other word but madness for the left today. And it just isn't like when you had a resistance movement in the past that, again, had a common goal and were far less, of course, we live in this very politically correct, world, which has really taken over any kind of attempt at affecting change in a respectful, calm way, because nobody feels free to even speak, right, without being shot down or labeled a sexist or misogynist or a racist or what have you. So that whole element that we live with today, again, wasn't there 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So that alone makes it so that they're never going to be effective because it's putting down any reasonable dialogue, even if people wanted to engage in it.
So I have a bit of a problem because I have 2 teenage boys, and they say that their gender choices are feminist or rapist. And that's what the world is. I mean, it's so sad. And they use the word, everything I do, like, oh, you're just a feminist, and that's a feminist. And they absolutely use that word on a daily basis. It's very strange.
To them?
Yeah.
People use that to them on a daily basis?
Yeah. No, they're telling me all the time, if I do something like, oh, you're just a feminist, or that's a feminist. They use it. I don't think they understand. I've tried to sit down and talk to them what it means to be a feminist.
Well, if those are the 2 choices, you can understand why they choose feminist. I mean, yeah.
There's a lot of confusion surrounding the word, so that's part of what I do is try to piece that out and explain it.
She is Suzanne Venker.
And I have a son too, so
you do.
I feel your pain.
Okay. Yes. She is Suzanne Venker, who does a good job parsing it out and explaining it. Cultural critic, author of the book "The Alpha Female's Guide to Men and Marriage: How Love Works." You can check out her latest column, "I'm So Happy Trump's Not a Feminist," at foxnews.com. Suzanne, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what